By the compulsion statute of Redwinter, Clause 9, if a conquered heiress stands unclaimed at second calling, claim right falls to the nearest sworn male of standing. Varick's voice carried to the fourth-tier benches without a tremor. He stood at the black stone center mark with a sealbook under his left hand, and his right palm lifted toward the old iron crown hung above the dais. The hall lamps burned fish oil and smoked at the rafters. 17 banners of conquered houses hung behind the witness rails, each one stitched with a silver ring to mark submission. Owen counted them in one sweep because counting was easier than breathing. 1, 2, 3. Ashford's torn hawk at number 11. She could feel where the floor stone dipped under centuries of boots, where moisture from wet cloaks had darkened the joints between slabs, where the cold came up through her soles and settled in her calves. The 4 witness tiers rose around her like stepped cliffs. Men and women leaned forward over carved rails, winter gloves dangling from fingers, hats tucked under arms, faces lit from below by lamp flare. She recognized too many of them. Lords who had assessed her as if she were grain. Ladies who had smiled with thin sympathy and then looked away. Clerks who never lifted their eyes from parchment while things were done in front of them. Cale did not sit on the throne. He stood one step below it, in a coat the color of wet slate, hands empty. He looked at Varick, then at Owen, then to the herald's brass rod laid across a stool. "You quoted Clause 9, he said, and omitted Clause 10. His voice was low enough that people leaned forward. The same statute permits challenge when coercion is alleged against witness integrity. Varick smiled with only one side of his mouth. Alleged by whom? A wing beat cut through the hall before anyone answered. Rook dropped from the rafter shadow, one eye bright as polished jet, and struck the rim of the oath cup on the challenge table hard enough to ring metal. The cup tipped, rolled, and spilled red wine across a strip of pale rush mat. Where the wine spread, a grainy white residue clumped like frost. A hiss moved through 4 tiers of people. Someone on the first tier swore. A woman in fox fur recoiled so quickly her sleeve knocked over her own cup. A pair of junior scribes looked at each other and then at Varick, as if waiting for his face to tell them which story to copy. Cale's jaw tightened once. "Alleged by the evidence," he said. The herald lifted the brass rod. "Hold all touching of persons until challenge is heard." Owen's fingers, clasped in front of her, had gone numb. Varick's face had gone the color of old parchment, and for the first time in 7 days, she saw him blink too often, like a man walking from cellar dark into noon. Then the story broke backward to where it had begun. Midwinter, 1327, the first choosing. The throne hall had been colder then. Snow had pushed under the south doors in a white seam and melted into muddy lines under people's boots. Owen Ashford came in with 5 other hostages from the lower marches, wrists uncuffed, only because decorum required bare hands for presenting. She wore her dead mother's iron bead at her throat, and a winter dress mended at the hem with blue thread that did not match. Tamsin stood in the hostage gallery behind a bronze lattice, 2 levels up, knuckles around the rail. 17 houses, called in order of surrender, had daughters on the floor. Some were 12. One was near 30 and kept lifting her chin as if a string held it. Drummers beat once before every name. Owen heard Ashford and stepped to the kneeling carpet, where centuries had worn one oval into the stone. She did not kneel. The steward in red and black court livery stared at her, as if she had spoken out of turn before opening her mouth. "Lady Ashford," he said, louder than necessary, "the carpet." Owen kept her feet planted shoulder-width apart. "I can see it." A low chuckle started near the second tier and jumped benches. Laughter came from the second bench tier first, then the third. Not all of it was cruel. Some of it was reflex, people laughing because they did not know what else to do when custom stuttered. A courtier in sable said, loud enough for the nearby rows, She mistakes delay for dignity. The steward pointed 2 fingers at the carpet. Kneel for claim inspection. Owen let the silence sit a heartbeat. Inspection implies purchase. More laughter. Sharper this time. One man slapped his knee. Someone hissed, "Enough!" but not to defend her, only to restore order. On the gallery level, Tamsin mouthed Owen's name through the bronze lattice. Owen could not hear her, but she knew the shape of it. The king moved then, and the room adjusted around him like cloth pulled straight. Cale crossed from the throne steps to the center mark without sword, without heralding, without asking for silence. "No kneeling," he said. "Not for this." A murmur traveled like wind through dry reeds. The steward bent toward him. "Your Grace, choosing protocol." "Protocol changes now." Cale turned so all 4 witness tiers could see his face. "I will not claim anyone who has not chosen me freely." Someone coughed. Someone else gave a short, unbelieving bark of a laugh. On the hostage gallery, Tamsin's mouth opened the way it did when she wanted to warn and did not dare. Owen heard herself answer before caution caught up. "Unusual policy for a king." The line landed, and the hall broke into scattered laughter that bounced off stone. One lord clapped once as if at a juggler. Another hissed at him to stop. A woman in green on the first tier covered her smile too late. Cale looked at Owen with a stillness that did not feel like offense. "Perhaps," he said, "still my policy." He angled his body deliberately so she was not boxed by him and the steward. It was a small movement, visible only if you watched knees and shoulders instead of faces. Owen noticed. The calling moved on after that with brittle efficiency, but the air had changed. Every name sounded like tinder being stacked. 2 girls knelt anyway, because terror outweighed anything said from the dais. One refused to speak and had to be escorted out shaking. When the final drumbeat faded, Owen was marched not back to the common ward, but down a side corridor lined with hunting tapestries, then up a narrow stair where the stone sweated damp through mortar. Censure followed the laughter as surely as weather. By evening, Owen had been moved from the shared hostage ward to a narrow guest chamber with a lock on the outside and no fire until midnight. She sat on the window bench in stockings, breath smoking the glass, and listened to boots in the corridor pause and move on. The oak shutters were barred from within by an iron peg. A hand could not reach in. She tried to warm her fingers under her knees. She tried to inventory useful objects: a wash basin, a chair with 1 loose rung, a spoon, 2 hairpins, a chipped mirror, a blanket too short for the bed. She tried not to imagine Tamsin in the gallery cell above the kitchens where the walls smelled of onions and old ash. A beak tapped the pane 3 times. Rook clung to the exterior ledge, claws on ice, one eye clouded white and blind, the other fixed on her. He had followed her since she stole him as a half-starved fledgling from a poacher's basket at 12. He pushed his head against the glass, then turned and pecked at the left hinge of the shutter bar, hard and fast, then looked back. Owen slid the bar free, opened the shutter a crack, and cold bit her knuckles. "You should be in a roof beam, you idiot," she whispered. "Not on a lord's window ledge where every archer in the keep can see you." Rook hopped inside, shook snow from his wings, and began pacing the sill. Then the writing table. Then the sill again in a jagged loop he used when agitated. She followed his line and saw what he kept crossing. A folded scrap of waxed linen tucked under the lip of the table where no servant would dust. Owen pulled it free with 2 fingers. No writing. Inside was a pinch of bitterroot powder, gray-green, the same sleeping draught used by surgeons to keep men under a saw. Her pulse struck hard once behind her left ear. If mixed into ceremonial wine, bitterroot would make speech slow, tongue thick, memory ragged by mourning. A woman could be made to nod through a vow and later be called liar when she denied it. Rook clicked his beak and fluffed once, as if saying finally. She wrapped the powder back into the linen and slid it into her sleeve seam. Then she crouched in front of Rook and held his narrow head between her palms. "You don't get to die for my politics," she murmured. "You hear me?" Rook pecked her thumb lightly, then climbed her forearm and settled on her shoulder, claws pressing through wool to skin. She let him stay until the midnight brazier finally arrived and the chamber warmed by a single degree. The next morning, the court held display drills on the practice dais in the inner yard, more theater than training. Snow had been shoveled into ridges along the walls. Owen was ordered to stand with the other hostages under an awning while claimants demonstrated sword forms before the benches. Varric wore polished brigandine and moved cleanly, each cut stopping exactly 1 finger width from where a neck would be. Applause rose in measured bursts. A herald narrated every pass for the upper tiers: control, discipline, restraint. The words repeated like hammer taps. Owen watched boots, not blades. Varric favored his right knee on turns. The court captain hit a limp when he reset stance. Cale, observing from the side platform, kept his arms folded and expression unreadable. At the rear of the dais stood the oath service table covered in white wool. On it, 7 cups, one for each day's formal witness rite, each cup engraved with a different knot pattern. A servant in gray set the 4th cup down, looked over his shoulder twice, and tipped a tiny vial into it before he poured the wine. Rook dropped from the awning beam and landed on the table edge, wings spread. The servant swatted. Rook snapped at his hand, seized the cup string with his beak, and hauled hard enough to drag the cup off-center. It struck the board, rang, and cracked at the stem. Wine splashed the cloth. White grains bloomed in it. People shouted. The servant stumbled back and ran. No one chased him for 2 full breaths because shock held them where they stood. Then Cale crossed the yard in 10 strides, took the broken cup in both hands, sniffed once, and set it down as if it were hot iron. "Seal the gate," he said. 2 guards moved at once, dragging the bar across the inner arch. The clang echoed off stone. Varric stepped forward with palms visible, expression bland. "Your Grace." Servants panic. It means little. It means someone expected a woman at this table to drink before swearing. Cale's eyes did not leave Varric's face. That means much. Owen had to fight the urge to reach for Rook and hide him in her cloak. Instead, she stood straight while the raven strutted along the shattered stem like a tiny victorious general, then lifted into the air and took the awning beam. He shook his wings and shouted once, hoarse and triumphant. By sunset, rumor had 6 versions of the incident. In 3, Owen had ordered the tampering herself to stain the king's honor. In 2, Cale had staged it to weaken rival claimants. In 1, the cup had cracked because Winter Silver does that. Owen heard all 6 before supper and none from the same mouth twice. On court day 3, Tamsin was allowed from the gallery to the side chapel for prayer under guard. Owen met her there between carved saints with chipped noses, in a slot of time measured by a sand glass and watched by 2 soldiers at the door. Tamsin clutched a leather folio against her ribs. "I stole this from the hostage's chest," she whispered. "Your aunt's record." Owen took the folio. The page edges were blackened from an old hearth spark. Her Aunt Elin had been forced claimed 18 years earlier to bind Ashford to a neighboring lord. The family record described the wedding day in 12 clipped lines. She spoke yes after 2 cups. Witnesses disputed her speech. Her seal was taken by guiding her hand. 3 cousins rebelled. Grain stores were burned. And within 2 winters, House Ashford lost its river levy and debt-bonded half its tenant villages. Coercion had not just broken one woman. It had pulled apart tenancy contracts, winter stores, marriages, and oaths that took generations to rebuild. She wrote this herself in the margin. Tamsin tapped a cramped note in faded brown ink. Not with blood, with spit and ash. Grandmother said she didn't trust borrowed ink after that. Owen read, If they call it lawful while your mouth is numb, they will call every scream politics later. Her throat tightened. Keep your head down, she told Tamsin. Do not answer anyone who taunts you from the benches. They already do. Tamsin's eyes shone with fury, not tears. One man asked me if Ashford girls come with reins. Owen's fingers dented the folio leather. Remember his face. I remember all of them. A guard cleared his throat at the chapel door, signaling halftime gone. Tamsin leaned closer. On second tier, left side, near the pillar with the cracked boar carving, 3 men always sit together. They trade notes before every calling. One has Varric's colors stitched inside his cuff. I saw it when he reached for almonds. You're sure? I am not a child with stories, Tamsin snapped, then softened. I am scared, but I am not wrong. Owen touched her wrist. I know. Before they parted, Tamsin pressed a tiny brass token into Owen's palm, stamped with the Ashford hawk. For luck, she said. Or for stabbing a lock. At dusk on day 4, Cale sent word, verbally, no written summons, to the map chamber. Owen nearly refused out of reflex. Then she went because refusing in private felt too much like yielding in public. The map chamber was circular, walls tiled in blue and cream, with pins marking river crossings and border keeps. A brazier hissed with pine resin. Rain hit the narrow windows in diagonal streaks. Cale stood at a cedar table spread with 2 versions of the hall charter. One current, one archival copy with older hand. He did not approach. I asked you here because I need you to hear this without 40 ears around us. He touched the older charter. Claim custom is precedent, not divine ordinance. The rolls say it plainly. I had the archivist bring these from the crypt vault this morning. Convenient, Owen said. Yes. He accepted the hit. Convenient and true. He read aloud, fingertip following each line. No claim shall be accounted heaven-bound. All claims proceed by witness and civic consent under Crown peace. He looked up. My grandfather's court blurred that. Varric benefits from blur. Varric was hall clerk before he was claimant, Owen said. He knows every blur. Cale gave a short nod. He copied statutes for 9 years. He knows where the old compulsion wording can be bent. Owen moved around the table and read over his shoulder. Marginal marks from 3 different reigns crowded the edge of the page. Amendments, objections, compromises written in ink shades that had browned at different speeds. If this language existed all along, she said, why hasn't anyone used it at choosing? He exhaled through his nose. Because custom is easier to repeat than to defend. Because no one wanted to fight a hall full of men who profit from certainty. Because kings like peace at supper more than process in public. He tapped Clause 10. I have had enough peaceful suppers. Rain drummed harder. Owen stepped closer to see the script and smelled wet wool, iron oil, and rain on him. Her skin prickled where sleeve met wrist. He reached as if to take her hand, stopped with 2 fingers space between them, and held there. I won't seize your wrist, he said. Not in private, not in public, not ever. The space between their hands burned more than contact might have. Owen exhaled slowly. Do you know what they say about me in the benches? I heard one line. I removed the speaker from my supper table. Only one? Her mouth bent to spite herself. Then you miss half the poetry. He almost smiled. I can banter later. Tonight I need strategy. Clause 10 lets me suspend claim right during ceremony if coercion taints witness integrity. That power sits in the hall charter itself, not in me as a person. If he invokes compulsion at second calling, I trigger challenge, and everything turns on proof. Proof I was coerced. Proof the process was contaminated. Your choice must be indisputable. Owen tapped the page where civic consent was written. Then make me speak in front of everyone who laughed. Agreed. She studied him for a long moment, measuring posture, breath, whether his eyes flinched when she held his gaze. "If I choose you," she said, "it cannot look like reward for your mercy." "It won't." He held still. "It will look like your decision." "And if I refuse?" "I keep my word and shield you anyway." The answer came without delay. Owen believed him, which scared her more than mistrusting him had. By day 5, the pressure sharpened. Anonymous notes appeared under Owen's door. "Choose quickly and keep your sister breathing. Don't shame your house again." One was written in a practiced legal hand that tried to look rough. The loops on the G and Y were too careful. She burned each note over the lamp and scraped ash into a clay cup. At second bell, 2 noble women happened to visit her chamber with trays of candied quince and pious concern. "You must be exhausted," one said, eyes bright and hard. "If you faint in hall, no one can blame you for what follows." Owen thanked them, did not touch the fruit, and had the tray sent straight to the hound yard where even kennel dogs sniffed and backed away. On day 6, a cup of broth arrived with crushed mint to mask bitterness. She tipped it into the chamber pot and watched white sediment settle at the bottom. She showed it to the guard on duty, who crossed himself and said nothing. That night, someone tested her door latch 3 times between midnight and dawn. Rook, perched on the lintel beam, gave a low clicking growl each time and did not sleep. On day 7 morning, a seamstress, mistakenly, brought wedding red ribbons to her chamber and asked whether she preferred knot or pin closure. Owen sent her away with the ribbons cut in half and both halves tied to the door ring where everyone passing could see them. Rook came for the 3rd warning at noon, in the rafters above the great hall where carpenters were resetting benches for reconvened claim right. He flew not to Owen, who stood on the side stairs with a guard, but straight to a beam above Varick's clerk's table. He screamed, an ugly, tearing sound unlike his usual croak, then dropped a strip of parchment he had torn from somewhere. It fluttered down onto the table. Owen lunged forward before the guard could react and snatched it. The strip bore half a sentence in clerk's hand and the tail of a wax seal. "If speech slurs, witness may attest intent from posture and prior obedience." Below it, initials VD at the margin. Varick entered from the west door as she read, saw the strip in her hand, and froze for one heartbeat too long. Then his face reset into courtesy. "Birds become thieves in winter," he said lightly. "Shall we prosecute?" Cale stepped onto the floor from the throne stair. "We shall hear challenge instead." That brought them to the cold, open moment. Clause 9, Clause 10, the tipped oath cup, the white residue, the hiss through 4 witness tears. Formal challenge proceedings took 2 hours and felt like crossing a frozen river on uncertain ice. The herald called each required component by charter: allegation, evidentiary object, witness acknowledgement, claimant response, sovereign suspension ruling. Cale kept his voice clipped and procedural, as if emotion would weaken the legality. He asked Owen to identify the bitter root in the first linen packet. She did. He asked whether she had consumed any oaths under sedation. She had not. The apothecary master was summoned and held the powder to his tongue, then spat into a basin. "Bitter root, cut with poppy dust," he said. "Enough in 1 cup to cloud speech for an hour, memory for longer." Varick denied ordering tampering. "Servants may be bribed by enemies of the crown," he said. "This proves nothing of me." Cale lifted the torn parchment strip with tongs. "Your initials. Any clerk can copy initials. You were hall clerk for 9 years. That is public service, not guilt." The 4th-tier benches leaned so far forward that one man dropped his glove and did not notice. The fleeing servant was brought in under guard, wrists bound with plain cord. He shook so hard the cord twitched against his pulse. At first he repeated, "I only poured what I was told." The herald warned him of perjury penalties. Cale said quietly, "Name who told you." The servant looked at Varric, then at the floor. Master Dane's clerk, he whispered, the one with the notch in his ear. He said it was physician's tonic for nerves, and if I asked questions, I'd lose my hands. Gasps rose and were shushed. Varric pivoted immediately. A rogue clerk acting for himself. Cale's expression did not change. Bring the clerk. The clerk had already fled through the laundry gate. His absence landed like a confession no one spoke aloud. Then Cale did what no king in living memory had done at choosing. He had the archival rolls brought into the hall and read on page before witnesses. 2 pages, then 6, then 12. Each line establishing that claim custom was precedent and that coercion voided binding force when challenge was sustained. The rolls smelled of cedar and old glue. Scribes held them with gloved hands as if touching bone. This is not heaven's decree, Cale said to the hall, voice carrying to the top tier. It is human law. Human law can be clarified where corruption has crept in. He recited the charter sentence that mattered. During ceremony, the Crown may suspend all claimant rights when witness integrity is materially compromised. Suspension slammed down like a gate. Varric's right to press immediate claim dissolved in front of everyone. The herald struck the brass rod once to mark it. A second strike marked entry into open choice procedure. Cale requested each witness tier to rise in sequence and acknowledge the ruling. First tier stood. Second tier stood with slower motion. Third and fourth followed. Scribes recorded each acknowledgement. No one could later claim they had not heard. For the first time that week, the hall's attention rested fully on Owen, and remained there. Cale stepped down from the dais and stood at arm's length, exactly as promised in the map chamber. His hands were open at his sides. Owen, he said, no title, no pressure in the word. You may choose now, choose later, or refuse entirely. Any option stands under charter protection. Speak only what is yours. The silence that followed was not empty. It was stacked with old laughter, old losses, and her aunt's margin note burning like coals behind her eyes. She felt the brass Ashford token in her sleeve seam where she had stitched it for steadiness. She heard Tamsin's breath hitch in the gallery above. She heard Rook shift in the rafters, claws ticking wood. Owen lifted her chin and made her voice carry. I choose you. A murmur rippled, then broke against the herald's raised hand. Cale did not move closer. Ask again? She said, half challenge, half plea. I will. He swallowed once, hard enough to see. Do you choose me free of threat, free of debt command, and free to withdraw before touch? I do. Her hands trembled, then stilled. I choose you because I want you. Not your rescue, you. The line landed and held. Even those who disliked her understood exactly what she had done. She had removed every excuse that might be used later to explain her away. Heat rose up Owen's throat and along her cheeks, but she did not look away. Cale's scent reached her when he stepped one measured pace closer, rain dried on wool, iron from armor buckles, cedar smoke from the map chamber fire. Her pulse thudded at the base of her neck. His was visible in his throat. He lifted one hand, stopped inches from her cheek, and waited. Yes, she whispered. Only then did his fingers touch skin, warm, rough at the pads. He traced her jaw as if memorizing map edges, then rested his forehead lightly against hers in the bond gesture used before the Crown generation. No kiss yet, no possession display. Witness first, consent first, breath aligned. The officiant, an old functionary with a voice like worn leather, read the mutual vow formula. Do you bind by will? We bind by will, they answered together. Do you accept reversibility ending now? They paused. The hall could hear cloth creak when someone shifted on a bench. Owen felt the exact point where choice becomes history. After this, Cale said softly, audible enough, nothing is reversible. Owen nodded. I know. So do I. We proceed, they said together. Only then did they kiss, brief and steady, in front of the same Rose that had laughed at her standing. When they stepped back, the herald recorded the bond in 2 ledgers, then turned both pages outward so first and second tiers could view the entries before sealing. Not all tenderness could survive that hall, and neither of them tried to force it there. That night, in the private solar above the west stair, they stood by a small fire that smelled of applewood and watched sleet rattle the leaded panes. Owen had changed into a linen shift and dark wool robe. Cale wore no crown, just a plain shirt laced half open and a scar over his right collarbone like a white hook. He set a ceramic cup of warmed pear wine on the table and left it there untouched until she nodded that she wanted it. She laughed once, shaky. You ask permission from furniture now? Only furniture and queens to be. Not queen yet. Chosen, though. He sat first, not blocking the door, and waited while she decided where to stand. She chose the chair nearest the fire, then changed her mind and crossed to him. He watched her hands as if they were instructions. She offered her right hand, palm up. He laid his left over it, then his right under, enclosing without trapping. Her fingers flexed, then relaxed. Her hands were cold. He covered them between his palms and waited. She leaned in first. The rest unfolded with hesitations that mattered. Lips, pause, breath check, hands resting and then moving when welcomed. When he untied her robe belt, he stopped again and met her eyes. She gave a clear yes. When she touched the laces at his chest, she asked, "Here?" And he answered. Desire had heat and urgency, but each threshold was named and answered before crossing. Afterward, they sat wrapped in a quilt patched from retired campaign banners, shoulders touching, listening to sleet become rain. Owen traced the scar at his collarbone and asked where it came from. Boar hunt at 15. I trusted a cousin's spear throw. Did you survive the cousin? He married into foreign trade and now sells salted eels. She snorted against his shoulder. Cruel fate. Indeed. He asked about the iron bead she still wore. She told him her mother had hammered it herself from a broken gate hinge during a bad winter, because metal that has already held once can hold again. Cale reached toward the bead, paused for permission, then touched it with one finger. Keep it, he said. Even when the circlet comes. Rook, who had bullied his way through a half-latched shutter, perched on the bedpost and fluffed into a black sphere, one eye closed. Owen reached out and stroked his breast feathers. You ridiculous sentry. Rook opened his bright eye, clicked, and tucked his beak again. Morning brought consequence. The reconvened hall assembled for final judgment on Varric under charter breach and contamination of right. He stood without armor, in clerk black, as if trying to re-enter old harmlessness. It failed. The torn parchment, the cup residue, the fleeing servant's sworn statement taken overnight, and Varric's own initials aligned into one shape no rhetoric could smooth. Cale spoke judgment from the second throne step, not seated. Varric Dane, by proven attempt to subvert witness integrity and compel bond through sedation and falsified attestation, you are stripped of claim right in perpetuity. A rustle surged through all 4 tiers. You will depart by West Gate before sunset with 6 guards and no retainers. You may carry personal clothing and 1 trunk of non-state papers. You will not hold office under this crown again. Varric's mouth worked once before words came. You break tradition for a woman who mocked you. Cale answered without heat. I break corruption for a realm that watched. Owen took 1 step forward. And for women who survived your wording tricks. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Leave. He bowed because he had to, not because he meant it. A bailiff removed the ring and sealed it into evidence wax. By dusk, his carriage wheels left 2 deep lines in slush at the west gate and vanished into pine shadow. The same afternoon, before the hall emptied, public restoration completed what private vows could not. Cale asked for the kneeling carpet to be removed entirely. 2 attendants rolled it up and carried it out under the eyes of everyone who had seen Owen ordered toward it. In its place they set a plain oak step before the throne, not below it, but beside. "Rise to your place, chosen by consent," the herald proclaimed. Owen climbed the single step. Cale placed no heavy conquest crown on her. Instead, he set on her head a circlet of braided silver and black iron, Ashford iron worked into royal silver at her request that morning. The metal was cool against her temples. The hall had to tilt their chins to meet her eyes now. Laughter did not come this time. Some faces were stiff, some moved, some calculating, but none were laughing. From the gallery, Tamsin pressed both fists to her mouth, eyes wet and furious proud. Cale saw her and signaled the usher. "Bring her down," he said. Tamsin came to the floor on shaking legs. A clerk read the safe conduct writ aloud. "House Ashford hostages released under Crown protection. Road escorts assigned. Border tolls waived for 1 year." Tamsin took the ribbon-sealed pass with both hands and bowed to Owen first, then Cale. "You're really letting us go?" she asked, because disbelief still had teeth. Cale nodded. "Tomorrow at dawn, 12 riders, straight road north, no detours." Tamsin looked at Owen. "I remember every insult." "Good," Owen said. "Remember this too." Night settled over the keep with a clean wind that finally cleared the smoke from the rafters. In the small throne antechamber, Owen and Cale sat at a table with stale honey cakes and strong tea because neither had eaten since dawn. They spoke of mundane things on purpose: bridge repairs before thaw, grain levies, which guest rooms leaked, whether ravens could be trained not to steal wax seals. "Not this raven," Owen said, glancing at Rook where he stalked the windowsill and inspected a spoon as if considering theft. "Rook steals by philosophy." Cale rubbed his eyes and smiled tiredly. "I'll have the Chancellery hide every seal under lock." "You'll still lose half of them." At one point Owen touched the circlet, then set it on the table between them. "This is lighter than I expected." Cale picked it up, weighed it in both hands and set it down again with care. The old conquest crown was heavy on purpose. It made women bow under ceremony. "Keep this one." She watched him over the tea steam. "I heard what you said in hall, about years of proving this wasn't theater." "I meant it. I plan to be difficult." "I have noticed." Rook hopped from chair back to throne arm and then, with blatant ownership, to the carved oak beside the main seat where counselors usually set scroll tubes. He settled there, claws gripping worn wood, and stared down the corridor as if guarding all exits at once. The next dawn, the courtyard stones shone with frost. Tamsin mounted a bay mare wrapped in a gray cloak lined with rabbit fur, safe conduct ribbon tied around her left sleeve. 12 riders waited with lance pennons furled to show escort, not threat. Owen held her sister's boot while she adjusted stirrup length 2 holes shorter. "Write if you can," Tamsin said. "Send through the Abbey relay. Use ash ink and the hawk mark." Tamsin nodded, then looked up at the keep walls, at the gallery where she had stood for 7 days, at the gate arch where guards now stood at ease instead of ready. "Don't let them sand you smooth," she said quietly. Owen's mouth curved. "I wasn't carved for smooth." Tamsin laughed once, a rough sound from too little sleep. "Good." They clasped forearms. Tamsin rode out through the north gate as bell 1 sounded. Rook circled once above her convoy, then returned to the keep, perhaps deciding this wall needed him more. He landed on Owen's shoulder hard enough to make her stagger. By noon, petitioners already queued at the lower chamber with disputes over fences, sheep tags, and a broken mill wheel. Governance arrived with mud on boots and voices hoarse from arguing on road miles. Owen sat beside Cale for first hearing, not behind. When a farmer addressed only the king, Kale redirected with a glance. Answer her. She asked the question. The farmer swallowed and did. A widow from the river ward presented a tax grievance and stared at Owen's circlet as if uncertain where to focus. Owen asked 3 precise questions, requested the tally slate, and found an extra levy mark entered after flood season contrary to posted rates. She ordered reimbursement in spring grain credits and a correction notice at the market gate. The widow bowed so quickly she nearly dropped her cap. Between hearings, Kale slid a scrap of parchment toward Owen. Eastbridge inspection? Together after third bell. She wrote back. Bring boots, not courtiers. Days later, in the throne hall now stripped of midwinter banners, Owen walked alone to the center black stone mark where she had once stood under laughter. Workers had lifted the kneeling oval and filled it with new slate flush to the floor. She crouched, ran 2 fingers over the seam, and felt no ridge. She stayed there longer than she meant to, listening to distant hammer taps from the outer yard, the soft flutter of pigeons under eaves, the whisper of her own sleeve across stone. When she stood, Kale was at the edge of the mark, boots quiet. Does it help? He asked. It doesn't erase anything. No. It changes where the next girl stands. He offered his hand. She took it. From above, a familiar weight dropped onto the throne back with a thump and an indignant croak. Rook arranged his wings, fixed them both with his single bright eye, and settled in as if approving a treaty he had drafted himself. Outside, the wind shifted from north to west, carrying thaw-water smell from the lower river. Inside, in the same hall where she had been told to kneel, Owen stood upright at the king's side, while Rook watched from the throne and the witnesses learned, in full view of all 4 tiers, what consent looked like when it was written into law and held there.